Dobro večer i dobrodošli na još jedan webinar InfostudHuba i Starti centar Subotice. Moje ime je Željko Crnjaković i drago mi je da ste sa nama ovo veče. Kao što sam najavio, to je kao što smo najavili u najavi ovog webinara, ovaj webinar će biti na engleskom. Stoga ja ću sad da se prebacim na engleski i zbog našeg gosta i zbog možda nekih drugih gledalaca koji su sa nama. So, let's continue in English. And welcome everybody to the webinar. This is a webinar of InfostudHub. My name is Željko Crnjaković, and I'm very pleased to announce our first foreign guest on this series of webinars. And my guest is Hector Kolonas from currently the US. Hector, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
Okay, so Hector you were born in South Africa, you lived on Cyprus, you're currently in the US, and you're kind of a digital entrepreneur, and the main reason I called you on the show, you have a couple of companies, Included.co, Syncaroo. You're active in a lot of other companies, like we talked about this, Coworking Library, Women Who Cowork, European Coworking Assembly, a lot of coworking communities. Did you actually run a co-working space at one time?
Yeah, actually, I ran a few co-working spaces. I launched co-working spaces in Cyprus in the middle of an economic collapse. So the whole economy closed on a Friday. They said the banks aren't going to open for the foreseeable future. We started a space on Monday or Tuesday.
What a perfect time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we launched it because of the collapse. It wasn't like something I planned to do. I was running a consulting company. But the space was there, people were unemployed, sort of what we're going to start seeing, unfortunately, now. And so there was space, there was people, there was passion, there was no money. So we launched co-working spaces. And
as
yeah, that's
most of us who launch co-working spaces do when we don't have any money. So
yeah.
I'm going to remind everybody that who's viewing to please at any point in time ask us questions in the chat. Hector and I will discuss them after our talk. So just a friendly reminder, if you have any issues with the webinar jam, just refresh the page and you should be fine. So Hector, were you always an entrepreneur, or did you have a real job, as we like to say?
I mean, I remember my earliest entrepreneurial journey was selling sweets at my brother's kindergarten after real school, and getting into trouble, and then getting in selling Mother's Day cards because I could spell Happy Mother's Day and people couldn't. So I think I've always had this sort of bug to want to solve problems and exchange value, create value, and exchange some resources for that. I did have a summer internship as a web developer for a pharmaceutical company. I lasted one summer, and I was like, having worked in sort of retail and in sort of tavernas and things like that when I was in Cyprus, I realized that it probably wasn't the best use of my time. I wanted to do something that was dev orientated. I mean, yeah, so I don't think I've ever had a full-time, long-term job. I've had sort of internships and placements in long-term consultancies, but never actually worked 9 to 5.
So your parents didn't, hassle you like, Hector, get a real job, don't do this, like part-time deals and stuff like that?
I think that they secretly prayed that I would get a full proper job at some point. I mean, they were both pretty entrepreneurial in their lives, so I guess I was lucky in that regard. But I've also been truly blessed to have people who support me and allow me to sort of try create an impact through an entrepreneurial vice. I'm not saying I will never have a job. I'm not saying that it's not for me. I'm not built for it. I'm just saying I just never landed up in that position where I landed up having a job.
Well, cool. Okay, you and I talked, and you said that you moved from South Africa to Cyprus, and then you went to study in the UK, and then you launched a couple of businesses from the UK on Cyprus, because we know how that goes. And
I never said that.
It's been a long dream for every Serbian guy and girl entrepreneur to have a company on Cyprus. But how did that go? So what was your first was it always a digital company? Did you ever do anything like open up a food court or a proper?
I mean, I got
a proper company.
Yeah,
Did you
proper company? What?
Yeah, like.
I think there was always some digital element to the businesses that I started or ran. The first actual incorporated entity was a company that sold consulting services, i.e. helping other companies do digital things. And so it was kind of a real thing. I had to go into boardrooms. I was around 16, 17, going into boardrooms and telling CEOs and CMOs why they don't get social. They don't understand, how a XYZ company who's in the B2B space can't be building Facebook games to get sales. And there was a physical element to it, but there was always something to do with virtual.
I want to ask
digital.
you on that. So how do you open up a first job as a consulting agency and have the I'm going to say the experience of going into boardrooms as 17, 18 years old? How do you build up a portfolio? Was it a fake it till you make it situation?
No. I mean, okay, the courage was definitely fake it till you make it, but the actual experience.
Courage, but the experience. Courage, everybody has courage today.
So the experience was actually when I arrived in Cyprus from South Africa. So I was about 15, 16. I arrived there. Everything was either in Greek or not hosted on the island. So there was no English directory of events and where you can go to and what things there are to do on the island. So I ended up launching a blog, which became an online magazine called onthisisland.com. And from there, I landed up teaching myself a whole bunch of new technologies like Facebook games and building social media virality and things like that. And from there, I actually got ad agencies who approached me and said that we love what you did with this. Can we acquire you? Can we, bring you in? And I'm like, well, I don't want to work for one company, but I can sell you my time. You can get 2 days a week, whatever. And that's how I kind of got pulled into the consulting world, away from the sort of digital publishing world.
Okay, and how did the consultancy go? So is it still alive today?
So the company still exists. I'm no longer pretty much involved with it on the day-to-day. I still have some ownership, but it still runs as a sort of WordPress plugin company.
So actually, the first business was the magazine, right?
So the magazine was the first business. It was kind of sponsorship-led. It was run as a sort of trade name of myself. It wasn't an incorporated entity. And that sold ads. It was a simple ad play. We created content. We sold tickets to events, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was just a one-person essential blog, just monetizing that.
And how did that go?
That went really well. I had to close the actual magazine a few years ago, actually now, just before I moved to the US, just because I didn't have the capacity to give it the love that it needed. But it went really, really well for a while. I mean, it was fun beating all the existing sites, beating the local media. It was fun, being able to bring new technology to the island. Like live blogging wasn't a thing before. We brought it there. So during the financial meltdown and a bunch of crises, we, led the local media as an independent news source, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking for that crash and burn story, and you're not giving it to us. So
So the crash and burn story is the consulting company. So the beautiful thing about working with ad agencies is they do everything. I say the beautiful thing. I say that with tears in my eyes. Ad agencies almost always work on long-term credit. So they acquire a service, they wait, they show the client, they bill the client, they pay the vendors 90, 100 days later. Which is great when you're selling innovative technology. They use it, they run the campaign, then there's economic collapse. So March 2013, the entire banking crisis in Cyprus and Greece collapsed. Everyone who had marketing budgets pulled their marketing budgets. The ad agencies could no longer pay for the things they've already used. So I went from, on paper, having a successful-ish business to basically being completely bankrupted as an entity. And that was kind of like a terrifying time to be involved with running a business. Luckily, I had no staff at the time. Everyone was kind of consulting and I'd already paid them. So I didn't have that stress on my shoulders of having to pay anyone except myself. But seeing, your net worth wiped out in one weekend is a terrifying experience.
I just recently saw like a trailer from The Wolf of Wall Street, and there is an actual kind of sideline to what you just said. So basically, getting rich on paper isn't the same as getting rich like in real life. So it's like most people that are just looking at the numbers on screen or paper can relatively recover from okay, I bankrupt this, it's just numbers on paper, like let's do another thing instead of losing my house and going out in the street. So what were this all happened because of the crisis, because the market crashed and everything else. Apart from learning to kind of keep 4 eyes open on the economic market and things around you, are there any kind of things that you realize that you could have done better on the business itself?
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely make sure it's more cash flow positive. Get revenue in as quickly as you can, and bank that, put it into sort of a war chest. Another thing is, if you're providing a critical service, charge before it becomes critical. If you're providing, a technology platform, do it on a subscription, do it on a way that you keep getting some of the money out whilst you're providing the value. Because why would the companies all go belly up, right? It's a terrifying place to be. Other than that, I think, definitely have a good idea of the accounting of the business. I made a lot of mistakes when I was really young by invoicing everyone. That's why on paper we're doing really well, not realizing that in the sort of financial structure of Cyprus, if you invoice, you owe tax on those invoices, and it's like that in a lot of countries. But I had no idea of pro formas. I didn't know that you kind of, if you're not ready to collect the money, don't invoice. So even though I went from being successful on paper to not having money coming in, I suddenly had this huge economic impact as well that followed on. So definitely getting a good grasp of the local, the way a business should be run and what the tax implications are and stuff like that is very critical. Something I'm still learning, having moved around all the time. Every country you go to has different tax implications.
and even the business culture in that sense. But you said one thing that I want to kind of deepen a bit, because I see a lot of people not even knowing what it is, unless to the point that actually having one, a war chest. So what is a war chest, and why should a company have it?
Sure. So a war chest is essentially a storage of funds or resources that you can deploy if everything falls apart, or if there is a strategic advantage that you can utilize by having disposable capital. And it's something that we then
disposable capital.
Exactly. So a lot of us are kind of trained that businesses are there to create shareholder value. That is the traditional capitalist glance of what a business is there for. But what they never teach you is that the company should be treated as its own entity. It should have its own resources for it to be able to make strategic moves and to be able to look after its employees. Given that, what happens if there's no sudden, for X amount of time, there's no income? How do you look after your employees? How do you retain your talent? How do you retain your vendor contacts without having to go out and undersell the product or do price competition, things like that? So that's kind of one of the main reasons for utilizing a war chest, and just structuring in a way that is efficient for the business. It all depends on the country.
So I usually said and we did this on the last webinar. So one of the hardest thing in entrepreneurship is realizing, even as a solopreneur, that the money that the company earns is not yours. It's the company's. And guys, save the money. So going forward, so how did Included.co happen? This is the main kind of business that you run. What is it, and where did the idea come from?
Sure. So back then, when I kind of got wiped out on paper, I went to all the ad agencies that I was working with to kind of figure out, is there some way we can do creative work or create like revenue during this collapse. And it was there where I realized that all of them were sitting with beautiful, fast internet-based offices full of coffee and great space. And I landed up turning those into sort of co-working spaces. So from there, we filled the spaces, got a bit of exposure on sort of how we took this really shit situation and made it into something that's good for the local community and giving freelancers a place to work, et cetera, et cetera. And by mistake, I landed up launching a sort of Airbnb for co-working spaces, just listing all the co-working spaces that kind of reached out to me, helping them fill their spaces. And that's kind of something I ran for a little bit after the collapse. But being as I like to solve really hard technical problems, I realized that doing sort of ad spend arbitrage is not a critical business. It's not difficult. And in turn, everyone will be able to launch an Airbnb for co-working spaces. So there was no moat. But what I did realize by running my own spaces and working with a bunch of really cool co-working spaces is all the members were buying the exact same things. They all needed specific services. They all needed supplies. They all needed laptops. They needed insurance. They needed bank accounts. But even though we were sharing sort of meeting rooms and offices and kitchens, we weren't sharing resources. We weren't sharing our vendors. And that's kind of when I took a step back and said, this is something that I can build for thousands of co-working spaces, and getting them all to sort of share this pool of vendors, get sort of the benefit of aggregated buying power, and leverage that to make not only the communities more sustainable, but also make the businesses inside of them more sustainable. And that's kind of what Included does. We now run the Perks program for 650 something co-working spaces. We run the Perks program for a bunch of co-working alliances, a bunch of freelance networks, incubators, accelerators, anywhere that there's a group of businesses. They use our technology to run their member benefits or their business benefits programs.
And so do you attract businesses yourself, or do businesses approach you, or, you know?
Right now it's a bit of both, really. I mean, we do a lot of grassroots marketing and sort of evergreen marketing, where we are positioned as the co-working perks benefits program or the freelancer perks benefits program, and that attracts a certain type of company. We also work with a lot of the co-working spaces to rebound their inbound sales to us. So a lot of people call up co-working spaces and be like, oh, you have 50 businesses. I'm going to offer you a super duper perk or discount on our service. And then they call the space that's double the size and offer a better discount. The spaces know this, so they send everybody to us. We negotiate for all the spaces, and then we put it into everyone's perks program. And then we also have the sort of what we call is the go fetch campaigns, where people tell us that they need specific businesses in specific sectors, and then we go and negotiate directly with the vendor.
You actually do this for a bunch of co-working spaces, not only in the US.
Correct.
You have co-working spaces all across the world. So my, initial kind of problem that comes to mind is, like, if the perks or if the services that companies offer are not exclusively digital, then you have to kind of regionize the companies, because if they sell stickers in the US, from Serbia can be a part of the perk program, but I don't care about that. They cannot send it to me.
So we have personalization built into the platform, depending on where you're logging in from, which community. You see perks that are available to your country. They might be provided by a company in another country, but if they've said that they can ship or provide the service into your locality, you will see that perk. In the same way as you can invite your own vendors. So let's say I am a member of a co-working space in Serbia. I know a great company that does stickers. I can invite them to offer perks, not to co-working spaces, but all the co-working spaces in Serbia, as well as any co-working spaces that they can deliver to. So I'm helping my local businesses. As a community operator, we also have this tier called hyperlocal perks. So if you've got great relationships with the businesses around your co-working space, whether they're sort of coffee shops or yoga studios, they're not necessarily going to be able to deliver a perk into hundreds of co-working spaces, but they can offer a discount to your members in particular. So you can sort of do these geo-fenced campaigns as well.
So basically, I was my next question would be what made Included a successful digital business. But I'm assuming it's your initial kind of connection to the co-working spaces that you ran, that you know, as you said, did the Airbnb for, and the initial you already had the connections in that. So on a lot of digital businesses, you know, guys put in, or girls, whatever, so put in a lot of hard work, and usually they need a lucky break.
Yep.
So, you know, like an overnight success after 10 years of hard work or 3 years or whatever. So in this case, it was a good network, a good starting base, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a few things actually. I mean, we started with a bunch of spaces that were, I mean, if we had tried to sell them this perks program from the first day, it wouldn't have made sense. Some of the spaces were bigger than us. They could negotiate their own perks. They could hire their own membership enrichment teams. But it was also the fact that if you focus purely on creating a little bit more value every month and bringing in a few more customers, I like to think that luck compounds. So the more value you're creating, the more businesses you're attracting, the more conversations you're having, slowly this builds up, and you get to a point where if you're adding, you know, 2 new spaces a month, and then you do that over a certain amount of time, your size is now big enough that you can attract the biggest spaces, and they're not bringing on 1 location at a time, they're bringing on 12 locations at a time. So you kind of get that point. I was also very strategic about how we entered new territories. When we entered from sort of Cyprus, Greece, and Spain, and we entered the UK market, I moved to the UK, but I also worked with the smaller independent operators first. I didn't go for the established players in the United Kingdom. I went for who can I create the most value for today? And then I worked with them. So the independent operators, I helped them not only promote their spaces, but provide competitive advantage against the bigger players, be able to provide better perks, be able to provide a better member experience. And then as you collect enough of them, you now have a bigger local presence than the bigger players. And then they get to the conversation of, okay, do we compete with this, or do we just use what everyone else is using? And that's kind of where you get to that snowball effect. So it is a bit strategic. It's not just purely luck. And you've just got to figure out who you can. People like to call it low-hanging fruit, but I just like to think about it as who you can create the most value for today.
When was it, you know, in a lot of entrepreneurial sense and stories, a lot of projects are, you know, first financed, bootstrapped, you know, investments, whatever it is, before they turn a profit. On the other hand, you have like ideas that are basically a landing page and don't grow into a business before they earn a profit for the first time, in the sense that they have like a pre-sale and a pre-membership and stuff like that. So how long did it take for you to get included from that, you know, kind of business idea, you know, running a business on your own funds to actually living from it?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't live purely from Included. It's my core business, but the main thing is that it took some time, but I was lucky in the fact that people understood that filling co-working spaces was critical to their survival. They understood that more than having a powerful perks programs will keep your members from leaving your space. So I used the Airbnb model to first build great relationships and then introduced the perks program. So it was about trying to figure out, going back to the whole, you know, creating value first. But it took about a year before we sort of introduced the perks program. It took about another year for us to start telling people what Included was going to become. For a very long time, it was just a map of co-working spaces. Because we didn't have the tech, we didn't have the perks, we didn't have anything. So it took time to build that up. But I also think that it's really important to get real customers using your software and paying for your technology or your business before you feel comfortable selling it. That is one of the biggest mistakes I made with Included. I waited too long to implement our paid plans. I waited too long to implement sort of monetization. even though the Airbnb for co-working space, that was monetized from the first day. So it was a revenue positive, profitable part of the business. I've now sort of downsized that because I don't want to be in brokerage. I don't want to be in ad spend arbitrage.
Yeah. You also mentioned that, so we talked about this also before the webinar. It's not your, like, the only source of revenue. You do consulting. Many people say that, you know, you cannot succeed in an entrepreneurial business if you don't focus 100% of your energy in it. So for you, I think it's always been a couple of streams and a couple of different areas of work.
Yeah,
So how do you manage all
I think
that?
I learned the lesson back, yeah, with great stress. No, I think what I realized back with the whole consulting business going under over one weekend is it terrified me to have only one source of income. It was. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people who disagree with me since then, but I'm a big believer in trying to create as many sources of revenue as you can in order to diversify your risk. Now, currently, yeah, it gets challenging when you have success on multiple fronts, because then not only where do you focus your energy, but who are you as Hector? I like to joke with a lot of my friends in the co-working world that if I carry on going at this rate, I'll have a longer sort of official title than Daenerys from, you know, Game of Thrones. And yeah, so like I'm now starting to sort of shed titles. I'm trying to just focus on, you know, where we can create the most impact. But yeah, it is a slippery slope. You have to be careful that the only asset you can't get more of is time. So yeah, I would definitely, although I love having multiple sources of revenue, I would prefer I would prefer to like be able to invest more time into the things that make the biggest impact.
I know exactly how you feel, because, you know, for the most time in the recent couple of years, when anybody asks me, what do you do? Sit down, it's an hour's talk. Like, you know, we need to go through a couple of things.
I brought the slide deck. One second, let me show you.
Okay, so let's go a little bit in general for the viewers. So what does it take to go from an idea and initial implementation of a digital product to actually making a profit, if you were to create, and actually you are creating a new company, Syncaroo. So the process. So what should people prepare for? You know, I have an idea, we're gonna, and I'm not just saying development. People can estimate development, but where does it go when it goes to market? So
sure. So I mean, I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of first-time founders, or even, you know, recurring founders or serial founders, as they call them, have is they try to keep their cards to their chest. They don't want to talk to people about their idea because it's so obvious, it's so genius that everyone's going to steal it. And the problem if you don't talk to people is you don't get any negative feedback, you don't get any criticism, you don't get to see whether that people would actually pay for what you have in your head. And with Syncaroo, before I even thought of creating a company for it, I wrote a blog post about how inefficient is it that we're copy pasting all the co-working data into different platforms in order to try and generate leads. And that blog post created a few conversations. I landed up chatting to a whole bunch of people around the world who've looked at the problem, have explored it. And that's how I landed up meeting the co-founder now, Robert Croft, who is now my co-founder at Syncaroo. We landed up having a few conversations. He's based in Barcelona, I'm based in New Jersey. And if we hadn't talked about it, if I hadn't shared my idea with the public, we wouldn't be launching a company right now in order to handle the global syncing of co-working and real estate data. So definitely talk to people about it, speak to customers, speak to people who might find it useful. Don't speak to your mom or your dad because they're going to tell you how amazing you are, you little snowflake. And yeah, so you got to speak to people who have no financial incentive or no emotional incentive to tell you that it's a good idea. And that's a scary place to be, but it's a good place to get good feedback on whether what you have in your head could work. Once you've done that, you'll also get a bit more understanding of who you should be selling it to. So you got to find that product market fit that all the VCs like to talk about. It's one thing to be able to offer a service. It's another thing to be able to find a way to efficiently distribute it. And distribution is the #1 killer of most small businesses. If you can't find your buyers, you can't find your clients, if you're spending ad money after ad money, you're essentially playing, ad spend arbitrage again. How do you spend $1 to get 2? And the easiest way to do that is to try and find local business that doesn't cost you money to do the things that don't scale. So speak to customers, do onboarding, do the hand holding, and then try and build systems around that, build automation, build things that you can then use less human time, less resources, and therefore make a bigger profit.
And let's go into a different problem. So basically, a lot of people developing a digital product for the global market do that because their local market is not adequate.
Yeah.
They want more. They want more public, more success. Maybe their target market, who spends more, is somewhere different.
Yeah.
So in that case, they cannot communicate constantly with the specific target public that may be the leads, the potential customers, and so on and so forth. And you and I just grazed on this topic. So basically, if I'm from Serbia and I want to target something for Asia or the US or the UK, apart from me moving there and creating my own first social circle and, going into a lot of pubs, meeting a lot of people and going to a lot of meetups and co-working places so that I can build up my social circle and do that content marketing, mom tests and stuff like that, how do you reach a market which is not connected to you? That's the point of doing a global market digital product.
Yeah. So, I think it all comes down to, what COVID-19 has done is put a magnifying glass on what is working with regards to B2B distribution. And that is that you can build a community from anywhere. There's nothing stopping someone in Serbia from opening a Facebook group or an online forum called Barbers of New York, and then selling your services to the barbers of New York without ever stepping foot in New York. There is nothing stopping you from creating a web domain for dog walkers of Long Island and creating value for them and building a community around that, and then using that as your sort of leapfrog into the market. We're seeing it now. People are having virtual meetups. We're having this conversation now. Why weren't we having this, 6 months ago? It's been highlighted by COVID that we can do it. And I think a lot of really good businesses have been building these virtual communities for the sectors they want to enter now or in the future. And then, if it's a hard market and it's a long sales cycle, hire a local representative. Once you have that sort of global, that sort of regional community, you can then activate it. I think that there is going to be a big shift into how online platforms are activating their communities in order to do sales. And then that's going to be increasingly more obvious or increasingly more native in a lot of the platforms as we move forward. I think that's the way I would do that. With regards to sort of not having access, I was lucky that when I figured out the internet and I learned how to code, I was fascinated that nobody knew how old I was. I was 13 when I built my first website, and it was selling virtual products in a game called Neopets, which is very freaking embarrassing, but that's my story. And what I loved is that I was getting messages from people who were 40, 50, 60, well, not really 60, the internet was pretty hot then, but 40, 50.
They didn't know how to use the internet.
Yeah, back then, we're talking about pre-dial-up, pre-DSL internet in South Africa. So it was a long time ago. And I loved the fact that I could communicate and build a community around something, and nobody knew how old I was. Nobody knew that I was based in South Africa. No, I didn't have to tell anybody that. And I think one of the biggest problems with business is people think that they have to only target people who are in their local community. There's nothing stopping you from creating an entity, creating a a community, and create value. If you're creating value, people will resonate with your brand and they will end up hopefully buying from you. But yeah, that's
basically, so your main kind of advice is first build a community, you know, investigate, connect with people, connect with your target market in some sort of way, give them some value. And then how do you step from that, you know, like being friends to actually you know, selling them something? I'm gonna say, you know, making
I mean, I think a lot of people feel
how do
really
you go out of
uncomfortable in
the
that
friend
switch.
zone?
Yeah, it's another way to use it. I think a lot of people struggle with that move from, oh yeah, I do all this stuff for you, but hey, I also need to pay my rent. A lot of people understand that if you do something and you create value, at some point you're going to need to pay your bills. I think what's really important there is to set boundaries for yourself early on, because a lot of people, if you give them a hand, they'll bite the whole arm off. So you've got to be able to know that the Facebook group that you created, that you're going to put, you know, one post a month or one post a week, that is your value creation. You're not going to go in and then, you know, walk someone's dog for free, or, you know, pay for their computer or whatever. You have to be reasonable about what you're willing to give, as long as it's valuable enough that you're attracting people for the right reasons. You're not scamming them. You're not telling them that you're going to give them X and then hook, line, and sinkering them. But I think it should also position you as a thought leader. That's a really good way to kind of think about how you can create value. If you're going to write blog posts, make it be about something that someone can then hire you to do better. Give away enough information, show that you understand the subject matter, but have your call to actions there. You know, just use good content strategy. So there's nothing shameful in putting out a blog post, providing that value, a how-to guide, whatever it is, and then a call to action. Be like, by the way, I do this, this, and this, or I do this. Here's how you can hire me to give you more help. How you can, you know, get me to come in and advise you personally. I think that it's a tricky thing to do, but I think if you're honest about it from the outset, as long as you don't say, oh, this is a free community, everything's free, everything's amazing, and then you try and charge, you're going to struggle with that.
Yeah. Quick, like multiple choice questions. So content marketing or ad spend?
Content marketing.
Like all the way, always?
No, I mean, I think once you get your systems and your processes and your efficiencies in place, where, you know, a lead costs you X amount of money to get, and you create a lifetime value over that time, yeah, definitely look at ad spend. However, if you can create really good evergreen content pieces, so things that will continuously come up in search engines, will continuously get shared, they're a very good resource for long-term lead generation. So I would definitely focus on that. If you're starting out and you haven't got capital, and even if you do have capital, you don't know what your lifetime value is yet. You don't know what your user acquisition cost yet is. So just deploying money straight into ad spend is very, very risky. You could burn it all without learning a single thing.
Yeah, but on the other hand, ad spend is usually sometimes, and we saw just as we discussed, so content marketing without getting to that target audience is very hard without some boost, boost of that content towards that public. So it's usually a mix of you do content marketing, you do a blog post, but you need to kind of put a little bit money in it just to get it to the right audience. So between the content, what should people nowadays, in your opinion, use mostly? So is it videos? Is it podcasts? Is it blogs? What works? You know, you're launching businesses all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that, what my number one go-to strategy for any sort of online campaign is own the ultimate asset. Wherever you're putting your content on, you should own that server, you should own that hosting account. I see a lot of people putting a lot of effort and time into a Facebook page or a Twitter account, which at any point,
a Medium page,
that could be terminated at any point, or that company can go belly up, or they change their algorithms and you're kind of stuck, trapped. Use the other social networks then to enforce your messaging. Send people back to what you can control, to something where you can control the call to action. You can have unlimited pop-ups or whatever it is that you need to do to get people to convert on those pages. Obviously, don't have 1,000 pop-ups. It's not 1999 anymore. But yeah, definitely point people towards it. Now, what I like to do is I like to look at inside the social networks. How can you build communities that are resonating with your message? Or how can you join communities and create value for those communities? So it's not just about posting it to your Facebook. It's about posting it into a group that gets why you're posting it. It creates value for that group. And that it takes some time to cultivate, but it's a good way to get that boost without having to deploy into ad spend. Because the big thing about ad spend now is it's not only just spending on sort of keywords, it's spending on like-for-like markets, like-for-like targets. So if you know that in this group, everyone loves WordPress and loves co-working, and you can share something, you can then use like-for-like marketing to market other people who are also like co-working and WordPress, but aren't in your group. So you have to be able to collect that initial data set before you can deploy a really good ad spend campaign.
So, but you skipped the part where I ask you which format of content would you advise? Yeah, so like, is it, everybody was crazy about video, blogging, now it's podcasts, it's audio, that's the future. Maybe it's going to be virtual reality, I don't know. So
I think say
all three, because
no. I think that you should have. I mean, it depends on your client market, right? I mean, where are they when they're going to list your message? If it's B2B, is it something that can get the message across on the commute? Is that where the kind of brand strategy you're going for? Then audio, podcast, that kind of stuff. If it's something that they need, you need to show them, you need to demonstrate, you need to be able to show graphical understanding to get an idea across quicker. Video, obviously. However, if it's something that's more long form, it's asynchronous, so they can come back to it at certain points, they can share pieces of it, text content.
Searchability in it, like skipping and
I think also people try to mix everything together. They try to put a video, audio, and text piece, and then people get to a page and like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. So I think that you can fall into that trap, but it all comes down to who you're trying to target with each piece of content. I've had a lot of success with video and explaining included early on, because writing it up just didn't make sense. Explaining it on the phone was working really well when people could see me and they could see my hands, and I could explain and show this and this, and if you connect that, it was making a lot of sense. We used that learning to then create a video. The video got a 200% increase in spaces signing up since we released it in that first sort of 6 months. So that worked really well. Now, the problem with video is it's hard to maintain. You can't dynamically change pieces of a video. So it's that kind of figuring out with what you can use each medium for is the right answer. Not this medium is better than anything else. If you ask social media managers right now, they'll probably tell you TikTok. I don't even know what the hell that is. So I think my grandmother has a TikTok account because my brother's back home. But other than that, I don't know what it is.
Okay, so we talked about tips and tricks. We talked about content. And so basically, what should people again? So I'm gonna draw back on something that I saw you do and talk to us about in the ECA. So should people brand the name or the brand, the business?
You mean as
like, are you so? If I'm doing multiple stuff as an entrepreneur, and I'm doing, for example, I'm doing a video production, I'm doing explainer videos, I'm doing a podcast, I'm doing co-working, I'm doing this webinar, maybe I'm doing event production, whatever it is, should I brand and promote myself like Željko is doing that, or should I build each brand and when I create content, should that brand create content or should Hector create content?
Yeah. Welcome to the new identity crisis of the digital age. when you, I mean, it's the same thing as if you asked me and I worked at a big financial or accounting or consulting firm, would the things I did online be attributable to me or to my employer? I think a lot
And
of
I'm going to go even further and say that you are your own employer, but the question for solopreneurs is, should I build my own brand, like a solution, explain a video company, or should it all be me and I do this and this and this, and whatever I send you an invoice from, it's just a name on paper?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to what your ambitions are for the company. If you want to start hiring people and you eventually want to be able to walk away from it, sell it, bring in other managers to manage it, it shouldn't be your name.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, what happens if everything goes terribly wrong and the company has to close? You can't get another name. You are always going to be Željko. I'm always going to be Hector.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, I remember when I started thinking about this, was someone posted a dilemma to me. Are you as a founder of a company, are you your company or do you work for your company?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I split it away. And I was like, okay, I am Hector from Included, but Included isn't who Hector is. Included can do something. It is its entity. I can hire people to do things for it. There's certain people who can represent it. But if it's tremendously successful or completely collapses, it's not Hector. Hector is a guy who happens to be associated with this entity. And that's kind of why I believe in splitting the two. You should have a company brand that does specific things, and then you should have your own personal brand that, you never know how the world's going to twist. I mean, if things go terribly badly and the internet collapses and we all need to find real farming jobs, having a CV or having experience is
having an old brand, like a blog somewhere on the
that means
intranet.
Nothing. But having, I mean, it goes back to the sort of CV, right, of the traditional world. Your personal brand should be your CV. It should be how do you point people to a place that they can then figure out all the things you're involved with. Because right now, no one's involved with just one entity. Even yourself, you're involved with podcasts, you're involved with your co-working space, you're involved with European Co-working Assembly. If I want to, learn more about you or interact with you or see how we can collaborate, there's no one place right now that I can get sent to. Some people use their LinkedIn for that. I can go to and figure out all the things that you're currently working on. I think personal brand is really good for that. It does become really confusing because then who do you post? Like, let's say I want to write a blog post about something that's happening in co-working. Do I post it? I own 2 companies now in co-working. Do I post it under Syncaroo? Do I post it under Included? Or do I post it under Hector Kolonas?
Or do I need to write three blog posts?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if you had the most time and you're free and you can just sit around and write blog posts all day, you would want to write it for the one that's going to convert the highest, and then write 2 small blog posts from the other ones pointing to that one. But who has time for that, right? So what you do is you write on the one that makes the most sense for, and then you get the other ones to reshare it or tweet it. It's a huge identity crisis. It's one I still haven't figured out. I don't know. A lot of the times I have a notepad full of articles and things that I want to share. And then I have to do this little mind game of, okay, which one is sharing this because all 3 of them.
You do that trick from the 4-hour work week with Tim Ferriss? You hire a Filipino to do the other blog posts or something like that.
You could, I guess. I mean, I think that there's better ways to do that, but it's just about figuring out efficiencies.
Okay, so I'm reminding everybody watching. So ask us a question. We're kind of winding down. So apart from a couple of praises in chat, so thank you very much for that. We don't have any questions so far. So my last question for you, Hector, before we go and see if our audience is going to ask us questions. So you participate in so many things. So a couple of companies, communities, side projects, consulting, webinars like these. You're married, amazingly, so how do you find the time, and what's your kind of trick and superpower for productivity and time management?
I think firstly, I'm very, very lucky to have a very, very patient and loving wife.
So far,
that goes without saying. The rest of the stuff is it comes down to time management. I love the Pomodoro technique. I love setting 20-minute work sprints. It gives me 20-minute work sprint, 5-minute break, or 25-minute work sprint, 5-minute break. And that gives me enough time to kind of do deep work for 25 minutes, 5 minutes, check social media, interactions, check messages, back into another 25 minutes of pure work. Do that a few times a day and you get quite a lot done. That, and I used to work really late at night. I like working when nobody was around to bother me. Before COVID, I used to wake up at 4 in the morning and work from then go gym at 6, and then carry on working throughout the day. But since COVID has happened, I haven't been able to leave the house, so I don't. My routine is crazily messed up now. I feel completely inefficient right now. So I'm trying to answer it with the most optimism that I possibly can. But right now, I feel like I'm really falling behind in things. But you know, I think everybody kind of feels like that right now.
Wait a minute, but apart from going to the gym, what did you go out for?
Well, went to co-working spaces. I went inside other spaces. I mean, it's also about finding an environment that works for you, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people forget the fact that in order to do your best work, you need to be somewhere where you feel comfortable, where you feel happy, where you feel, you know, able to do work. And that's why I'm laughing at all the people saying that, you know, working from home is the future of everything. No, because people aren't happy working from their desk, not all the time. People want to have another community, being able to go somewhere and just chat to someone at the coffee machine. It, you know, inspires you to kind of keep working, and you're seeing other people working. So leaving the house for that was great for my efficiency, because I would go to one co-working space in the morning, everyone's busy working, and then I go to another one where people are more focused in the afternoon, for example. And just having that change of environment means that I have a space depending on what I'm working on, and kind of doing that. So that helped a lot pre-COVID. Now I moved from this desk where I'm sitting at now to the kitchen table to you know, standing by the fridge and eating all the food. That's the current movement that I have.
Okay, so for the end, so how's COVID? I'm not going to say treating you, but you know, how are things? How's COVID treating you? So is it good?
I think COVID can piss off.
How's the situation in New Jersey right now?
Oh, I mean, genuinely, we don't know. We're waiting as a people of the East Coast. We're kind of waiting for us to hit the numbers where we can kind of enter the reopening phases. Some of the regions are sort of teething with reopening. I mean, we just genuinely don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave coming at the end of the summer. We don't know if travel's going to reopen.
But it's still like lockdown and
I mean, you can go outside. There's just nothing open. The other thing, like only the essentials, only the shopping centers, not the shopping centers, only the groceries and the rest of the restaurants are open, only for takeaway. Other than that, I mean, they've just 2 weeks ago, they opened one of the big state parks, but you're only allowed to walk through it. You're not allowed to sit and chill. So that's what we did the last 2 weekends. We just went for a 4-hour walk through the park on the weekend because you can't do that any other time.
It's a big ass park for a 4-hour walk.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's huge. It's also, I mean, it's about half an hour walk from the house, so we walk there. But yeah, my little puppy was not happy with that because we didn't tell her it was going to be a 4-hour walk. We just like, let's go for a walk, and the puppy was like, yeah. And then 4 hours later, it was like, what the hell happened?
Take me home. Okay. Okay. So it seems like we answered all the questions, and we don't have, but we have, you know, like unnoted excellent practical pieces of advice that anyone interested in digital marketing can start with. So thank you very much for that, Hector. And thank you for being my guest on this InfostudHub webinar. Any thoughts for the end?
Just look after yourselves. I mean, these are unprecedented times. Just focus on, you know, looking after yourself and your loved ones, and the rest will kind of fall into place. We don't know how it's going to land. Just don't take anyone's advice too seriously. Figure out what works for you, what works for loved ones, and that's all that matters.
Thank you so much for that. So guys, thank you very much for the ones who are with us live, and for the rest, I hope you like the video. Me and Hector are saying thank you and good night to you all.
Ciao, ciao.